So we're introducing the first Flix and Chat from Unity Project. Flix and Chat, what we're going to hopefully try and do on a monthly basis, we're going to try and use media, things that happen in the media, whether it's movies or news or entertainment and things like that, what have been recorded and can be watched by people within the community and interested people. After a group of people have watched it, we're going to arrange for some interactive discussion via this platform, which is the Flix and Chat. And hopefully that will be on a monthly basis. So covering all kinds of different interesting topics via media-led, media-driven. And that's how we're going to get the discussions started on this interactive platform. To add to the other interactive platforms, what Unity Project are going to be putting out there, which is the podcast. So they're the two different discussion platforms that we're going to be running. So that's brief introduction of Flix and Chat, really, if that makes sense to everybody. I hope it does. Okay, so it's a case of getting something out there, what we're all going to watch. That'll be promoted via the social media. So everybody's got a few weeks to go and take in some of the material what's suggested, and then come back and discuss thoughts and feelings on whatever it was what we watched. And most of the stuff what we're going to be watching is going to be on a cultural base, going to be coming from a cultural basis, so that it can spark discussions around topics what we need to be looking at to improve things in our community. Okay, so that's Flix and Chats. Okay, next slide. Unity in the community, Unity Project Sheffield. So, Kev, I don't know if you want to say a few words about Unity Project and how it's come about and what the intentions are moving forward.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Scott. I am the current chairman of Unity Project Sheffield, and as you can see on the screen, these are the other core members of the organization. We all work together in order to try and create a bit more unity in Sheffield than we already have. You know, the aim of the organization is to bring all kinds of people together, basically, to cut in a nutshell. And when we say bring together, we mean bring together in love, peace, so we can work together in harmony. We're not talking about we're not a racist group. We're not a religious group. We're not we want to try and remove all the divisions. There's many divisions and things that divide us as people, and we're just trying to remove all those barriers and say, let's come together and, try and achieve something. So in a nutshell, that's what the Unity Project's goals are. And that's what we're trying to achieve. And hopefully one of the reasons for this, one of the reasons for creating this show is because we all came to the conclusion that without communication, we have nothing. And we need to find ways of interacting with each other and speaking with each other about certain topics that, to be honest, are not spoke about in a public forum in Sheffield. That I don't know about other places, but it definitely don't happen in Sheffield. So yeah,
and that's obviously in order to, that's a starting platform in it, so we can build on that.
Yes,
onto bigger things. But until we start discussing stuff with each other and having conversations, nothing can get going. So on the right hand side of the screen, you can see it says project members. So obviously Kevin's just spoke. He's the founder of the project. Came up with an idea what was sparked from a podcast that went on Facebook, and then other like-minded people levitated towards that to see if we could get together and get something going. My name is Matthew Ben. I didn't introduce myself formally at the beginning of the live. I'm one of the project members. Also, you've got Jesvine Clark Derrington, who's one of our members, quite highly skilled in the ICT area, so she looks after a lot of that area of our organization. You've got Shane Spence, who's a qualified graphic designer who looks about a lot of our graphics and a lot of promotional material, as well as other stuff. And then we have other members being named Delon Nembard, Gavin Griffiths, Ron McKenzie, and Naisha Thompson, all involved in some way or another within the community, whether it's work-based or voluntary, and all having various professions, qualifications, and skills that can be brought to the project.
And we are still looking for more members and more people to join. I know when I initially spoke about launching this company, a lot of people showed their interest, and I was like, yeah, don't worry. When we get up and running, I'll give you a shout, and you can come on board. Well, now this is me giving you that shout. So if you're watching this video and you were one of them people that you know, DM'd me or inboxed me, then know that now is the time. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so as I said, Flix and chat, we're going to be looking at various things within the media, TV programs, documentaries, movies, performances and whatnot. And the first one, what we decided to choose, which was one what was aired quite a while ago, to be fair, but it's still on BBC iPlayer and still can be watched, and was one what seemed to be, it brought up a lot of interesting points when it was aired. And it's around one of the common issues within our community, which is education. And the program was called Subnormal, a British Scandal. That was aired on Thursday, the 20th of May, 9 p.m. on BBC One. Like I said, it's still available to watch on iPlayer for the next few months, I think. What the program looked at was West Indian migrant families. I don't really like West Indian as such myself as a term, but that's the term what's used. West Indian migrant families, what came about in the 1960s. Now the education system treated and saw Black young people at that time. Obviously, as we all know, if you know, we all should be aware really that the 1960s, 70s, even 80s, 90s, and present days were challenging times. But you know, the 1960s and 70s were obviously very challenging, with people coming from the West Indies fresh and facing lots of different hurdles in front of them. So one of them was hurdles for the children and the families. So what the program focused on was explaining how these children were not given a chance to develop intellectually and labeled as difficult, stupid and disruptive. Even when they were highly educated and highly able, clearly to everybody, there's still a way of pushing them down that road. It also explained how psychologists, trained psychologists, professional psychologists had put together theories of how Black people were genetically less intelligent at that time. That was one of the conversations, less intelligent than white people, to be specific, which influenced teachers' training during those times as well. So teachers what were coming in young, you know, possibly middle class white teachers at that time predominantly, were getting that training drilled into their from, so that's how their approach to Black young people and children were in school, and that was their approach. So they already kind of made their mind up, and that's what the documentary looks at. It has a few people who they interview, a few families, few grown-ups who was children at that time, what went through education system, and also a few people what got through to the other side. So a few professionals what to this day go around and lecture around similar issues in education and whatnot. So it was worth a watch, and I know a lot of people did actually watch it. Like I said, if you're still interested in seeing it, it's on BBC iPlayer for the next few months.
That was good.
So
that was a good description, that, Bente.
Yeah, so we were trying to make everybody aware of what we're discussing. And then obviously, like I said, the Flix and chat idea is after we've done that, we're gonna pose some questions to each other so we can have an open discussion. There's not many people on the live this time today, but this live will go out on a recorded show on social media for people to watch, and there may be some follow-up lives in regards to this similar topic, which will explain at the end of this live how people might want to get involved in that one. So me and Kevin both watched the documentary. So the first question of have you watched the documentary? If so, what are your thoughts? Goes out to me and Kev, really. I've watched the documentary, and as I said, I found it highly interesting. I currently work in education, so it enabled me to make some comparisons as to what happened then and what may be still happening now or not. Obviously, like I said, the 1960s were always going to be, always were a challenging time. And me being me, to be fair, talking to you, Kevin, because it's you what's on the live, it wasn't really highly surprising, some of the information what came out on the documentary. It weren't really surprising to me. I kind of had a feeling and knew myself from my experience through in the 80s, going up through to the 90s at school, that things may have happened like that within school. For some people, it might have been a big surprise that things like that could happen in the education system in Britain or in Great Britain, a place what we was invited to as British citizens at that time. But as I said, the approach to Black young people was that they was less intelligent or less of beings, I would, in some ways, in a wider scale. Black people were looked down on, and obviously possibly never really wanted us to achieve or wanted our children to achieve academically. We was brought over for a specific reason, weren't we? And I think a lot of people probably wanted people just to stop in that role and that bracket and not branch out, get themselves educated by the British system and move on to bigger and better things. So there was a lot of children being held back, basically. And also for me, I know that there's the cultural difficulties. So when people aren't culturally appreciated, that also can have a hindrance on young person's development within the education system, specifically to this discussion, but in other areas as well. And I personally found, even in the 80s and 90s, that culturally, a lot of our culture wasn't accepted. So you already are faced with a bit of a struggle of acceptance within the school setting, whereas other students around you may not have that issue. But that's further later in the discussion, we'll look at that a bit more, because there are other ethnic minorities, if people like that term or not, that's the current understood term, who seem to achieve quite well within the education system. So that's what the discussion really was about, to see if people can fathom why that is, or whether they already have worked out and researched why that is, and so on and so forth. But there's still quite a lot of question marks there for me and other people. And what your thoughts are, Kev?
Mine were very similar to yours, bro. Like, to tell you the honest truth, I was going to say the same thing, that it wasn't very surprising to me, because I think a lot of us know the basic outline, structure, and can imagine, what happened in the past wasn't very pleasant. But sometimes when you hear it, there were a few things what I never considered, and they were little eye openers. Things like the view of the parents that were sending these kids to school. Like, for example, they thought that they were actually doing good things for their kids. Like, their intentions was good. They were thinking, look, I'm not educated and I've had it tough, but I want you, the child, to go to school and get a good education so that you can do much better than what I've done in life. And
Mm.
when they said to him, you know, your kid's going to a special school, they actually thought it meant, you know, you're going on to great things. Like, this is good things for you. You've been selected, you've been chosen to go to this very special school. And as we know, it wasn't like that. And also, a point that someone made to me earlier was that, like, a lot of Caribbean people thought at that time, especially the ones coming literally like coming fresh off the boat and into this country for the first time, they believed that the English education system was far superior to the system back home where they came from. And that if your kid went to any school in England, it's good. Because it's in England. And so they wasn't aware of what was really happening to their children behind closed doors. And that was a big eye-opener for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, like you were saying there, two things there what have kind of come to my mind when you were speaking. The parents of that that first generation in that decade or decades, they had kind of an impression of the empire, didn't they? They've been given the kind of an impression of the empire, that it's all great and it's all shiny and everything's nice. So even people, a lot of elders what I've overheard talking or spoken to, including my parents, when they got on the plane to come over, or if it was a boat they came on, they thought when they landed, they were going to see like this kind of magical place, what were paved with gold kind of thing, and everything's clean and everything's nice. And, you know, when they got here, a lot of people were disappointed. And if you watch a lot of documentaries or listen to a lot of people, elders talk, you'll get that picture. With the education system now, they kind of had a bit of a false trust in it, didn't they? Because that's what they've been taught, that this is the best. You know what I mean? And they had this trust in it where it's good and it's right and it's you know what I mean, it's good for you and it's going to work for you, and you got to make it happen. And that was a bit of naivety in a sense. Not to say that British education system is not good, because it is obviously a good education system, but it's how it's set up to support Black young people, and Black young boys in particular, which has been the issue. So, like, even a lot of us, and when it comes down to our generation, we're finding that when we were going through these issues at school, you couldn't really go home and conversate about these issues with parents as such, because they didn't quite understand, because, like I said, they've been taught teachers right, you know what I mean, you're wrong and whatever, do what the teacher says and all this kind of stuff. But when you've got people within the establishment what have had the mindset of some of the stuff what comes up in the documentary, then that becomes an issue, massive issue. And it can only lead to people disengaging from education, really, at one stage or another. I always found myself personally, again, that primary school was a lot easier for us. I don't know if that's a personal thing or whether that's across the board with quite a large majority. But primary school seems to be quite easy, because at that stage you're just deemed as like cute and cuddly. You're you're not threatening. You're not got kind of any power as such. As you start to become a teenager and a bit more worldly and a bit more eyes open, a bit more woke, as such as the new terminology is, then that's when a lot of the issues start, or where you may start to levitate towards a group of Black young people. So you're not just your own, you're not just this individual now in a school full of white children. You know what I mean? You're now maybe 4 or 5 or 6 here what have found similarities and levitate towards each other. That's when the issues start. Or, you know what I mean, what I experienced or observed. And imagine it was 10 times worse back in the 60s when the documentary.
It was, yeah. And a lot of things you can imagine them. The reason why we know it's true is because you can imagine because some of it is true still to this day. When I say that, I mean like things like, for example, a lot of people abroad still believe that England is paved with gold, and that, you know, as you know, there's lots of people in Jamaica and Africa what would broke their neck to come here in an instant, still to this day. Do you know what I mean? That's a big thing in Jamaica, isn't it? Like, well, I go to England, well, I go to America, and that's all the money there. You know what I mean?
Which is true within reason, isn't it? Like I said again, the money is here, the education is top education, but how people from different communities are treated within establishments is where the issues lie. So whether you can excel in your profession at the same pace as somebody else beside you, or whether you can excel within academics as somebody else who you've grown up with, is the question. Does that happen or does it not happen? Fairly. I'm not here to say necessarily. I have got my own opinion, obviously, and my own experiences, but I'm not necessarily here to say that yes or no. But through discussions like this, we can decide as a community whether or not we think so, and if so, then we can look at ways in which we can improve our situation without having to lean on anybody too much. You know what I mean? It's more about becoming more self-aware and more self-independent in that sense.
Going back to a point what you just made about the about parents helping you with homework and stuff, I feel like generationally we can prove something here. Like, so for example, that first generation in the 60s, like I said, you think about it, them parents fresh off the boat, a lot of my granddad's generation can't really read or write. Like, they're not really competent in that area, because obviously they've not done too much of it. And then, so that's why they sent their kids to school hoping that, they were going to get the education that they never had. But because they were so uneducated, they couldn't see what was happening. But then, obviously, you've got that generation what went to school in England, and then now they are our parents. So our parents are like what you could call, some are second generation and some the parents sent me, didn't they? But either way, a lot of our parents actually went to school in this country. And as a result of that, a lot of our parents can read, write, and are educated. You know what I mean? They're not as educated as we are now, because we've got access to internet and all them things, but they was educated more than their grandparents. And now what I'm saying is we have come more educated than them. So because we've gone to school in this system and we've got all these access to resources like internet and all these things, our generation is now more educated than the ones that first came here. And because of that, if you notice, in every generation, as the intelligence increases, so does our knowledge of how you're actually being ripped off.
But Kev, as well, sorry to cut you.
Yeah.
And you probably, I don't know if the wording, whether you meant it that way or not, but from going by the documentary and experiences and also other knowledge, it's not so much the intelligence what we're lacking.
No,
in some
it wasn't
people,
the intelligence. No,
the chance to excel in that and show that intelligence what they wasn't given at that time. You know what I mean? So a lot of the first generation could have probably done better in the English schools, but like the documentary kind of showed, they were sent off to special schools. Do you know what I mean? Just because they didn't do something in the exact same way that Johnny did it, or
because they were saying in that show they was using the example of a tap, weren't they? And they were saying that basically back in Jamaica, a tap is called a pipe. And that a lot of these Jamaicans, when they heard that word tap, they didn't know what they didn't know that they were referring to a pipe or to a water faucet. Yeah. So they got that question wrong, but they didn't get the question wrong because they don't.
No, it's nothing that's not a test of intellect, is it?
Yeah, it's not intellect. That is just dialect, isn't it?
Dialect.
And culture
again.
Cultural, yes. So basically, this was a lot of the barriers. And plus, as well as we know, a lot of people were prevented from reading and certain things. So that's why the reading and the writing thing in that time, in the 50s and 60s, and that wasn't very big amongst Black people, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it is what it is. But yeah, it was a good show, and it sparked a lot of interesting conversations, and it definitely got your brain thinking about numerous different things. So yeah, good show.
Yeah. Gavin, I don't know if you can hear. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I can hear. I was
watching it. Did you have any thoughts?
No, I never got to watch the documentary. I just jumped into just to show some support and things. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but if you want, you can give me a brief oversight.
Yeah. So, as I was saying to Kevin earlier, the documentary was looking at immigrant families from the Caribbean. I think I prefer Caribbean and West Indies personally, because there's no such place as West Indies, really, is there? You know what I mean? It's India, and that's it. West Indies is but anyway, because he's only put names and stuff what's given and stick over the years. But when you look back into it, it all leads back to one origin. So in the 1960s, yeah, when people from the Caribbean first come over, families, their children in the education system, we're looking at how they were treated in the education system at that time, and how a lot of children, bright children, intelligent children, weren't given the chance to excel academically and were more labeled as disruptive and stupid and difficult. Some of the words what we hear up until modern times, to be fair, when it comes to Black young people. And they were saying, Gavin, as well, that there was even psychologists what came out with theories and reports what suggested that at that time, as you can imagine again, suggested that Black young people were less intelligent than white young people and so on and so forth, which is obviously not true. And looking at some of the achievements of modern times, possibly, can be that theory can be turned completely on its head. Highly talented people we're talking about, and children even from young days. Like I was saying to Kevin, Gav, when my experience at primary school, because you're a bit less threatening and you're a bit more cuddly, you know what I mean, your little afro and things like that, you kind of get it a bit easier, and also you tend to shine. I don't know what everybody else experiences, but you tend to be up top in class and stuff like that, but it all seems to fall apart when you go to secondary school sometimes for a lot of us, especially from Caribbean background. There's other stats in regards and evidence in regards to people from Black African backgrounds and so on and so forth. And we'll look at some of that a bit later in the discussion and try and fathom why some of those reasons might be. I'd listened to some of what you guys were discussing the other day, and you kind of touched on that. But like I said, we'll come on to that later. So that's what the documentary was mainly about, Gav.
Okay. Yeah, man.
So it's sort of what most people can probably relate to, or kind of, you know what I mean, absorb.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, man. Sounds like it was interesting, so I'll have to catch up on it.
Yeah, I was saying it's still on BBC iPlayer, so you can catch up.
Now I'm the TV license.
Can still click yes,
Let's go to the next slide, bro.
Right, so the next question. Do you believe the education system is still failing our children? So
you know what?
I thought that come later on in the presentation, really, but obviously it's the next slide. And that was what was flying around in my head, really. So that was 1960s. We discussed about that era, possibly going up to 70s and whatnot, which we all know was a challenging time, regardless, in all different aspects of integration. But has anything changed? Or
you know what? Looking at this question, and maybe this is me sharing my personal views and belief here from what I've personally been through in my life. And I see it as almost everything boils back down to yourself, you know. Do you understand? Like, you're responsible for your own actions and for what you do. So I'm only saying that based off of this question where it says, do you believe the education system is still failing our children? And I just think, like, if our children are failing, then
I'm listening.
it's not the education system's fault, it's our fault. Because they are children.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So if we're going to lay blame on the education system,
I
you have to
agree.
ask, like, who told you to send them there anyway?
Yeah, I agree with that thing that it's on yourself. But the problem is when you're a child, yeah, you haven't fathomed that yet. It takes a while for you to realize that you're actually responsible for yourself. Do you understand me? When you're a child, your parents and that will be telling you all these things and telling you all that and this and that. But I don't know whether it's some youth are, but I don't know whether it's the mental capability to comprehend what actual responsibility is.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect a child to think that. I was thinking more, it's the adult, it's the parent, basically, or it's the adults, it's the thinking people that are around who, like, if you're going to go, for example, if you're a parent and you're going to go down to the school and start cussing off the school and saying, how could you do this, how could you do that, which rightfully so, obviously, if they've wronged your child, then somebody's supposed to get cussed. But I'm just saying, ultimately, the blame is always yours because are you sending them go out of school?
I think you've got it a bit hard there because obviously there's a history and a story going off, and obviously the book's gonna lie with us. When I say the book's gonna lie with us, I think the biggest percentage of the book's gonna lie with us. But I think it's a partnership, personally. And education myself, as you do, you work with slightly older young people than I do. A young person's got to be showed care and acceptance and genuine care and acceptance, and they've got to be made safe and they've got to be made appreciated whilst they're within that establishment. And not to say that all teachers are like that or all establishments intend to approach things like that, like in the 60s and whatnot. I don't think that's the case. But you will still have individuals within the establishment and maybe people in high positions within the establishment also, and also people within the government who look at the national curriculum, etc., who don't fully appreciate and understand the importance, or if they do, are playing dumb to it. For example, for me, really, even the curriculum itself, how it's set up, where you talk about history in the sense that everything good and great is come from the European, and you don't hear no mention of Africa unless it's unless it's slavery and that kind of topic. That you discover that that's where Black people kind of just miraculously arrived from at that moment in time in history. There's no kind of celebration of positive Black history before that time, or even that much after. Obviously, you get Martin Luther King and Malcolm X for your civil rights part of the.
Well, let me cut you there. Let me just stop you there. A second. Because I agree. I'm not saying I disagree with what you're saying, but like, I've been thinking about this, yeah? And in every country, do they not, like in their history lessons, in their class, do they not teach their own history? So like, for example, if we go to China, I'm sure their history lessons about Chinese history and probably, all the great and wonderful contributions that China's made to the world. Yeah. And it'd be the same if we go to Italy, or the same if we go to, I don't know, Botswana.
I agree. I think you're right. But when it comes to, I mean, this might be my personal kind of take and opinion on it again, but when it comes to Black people and our history and the movements, what we've been on, mainly forced initially, and then some by choice, which subconscious choice in a sense, because you're still moving towards things to kind of better off your life. So you end up leaving family behind and you do this and you do that and whatever, just, you know, economic status really. But them countries, such as the Caribbean, for example, if you go to Jamaica and whatnot, a lot of their curriculum has been colonial curriculum. So it's the same teaching what you're getting. You know what I mean? There's only like, due over time, they've kind of adapted and started to put in a lot of their own history so that they can build the confidence within their young people, and it makes the difference. When you've got an intelligent or educated Jamaican person, they've got an additional strength to them than a Black British young person who's gone through the education system over here, because they've got the education and the academics, and they've also got the cultural understanding and strength. And you get what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
I understand what you're saying.
So it's a case, it's kind of like a power thing in a sense, isn't it? That issue, what you're saying, is taught in all these countries, Italy and whatnot. It's because they were or are the ruling countries. China, you know, in a sense, is a bit different again, because China's not had that mass migration of Black people into the country. They never asked, you know, a portion of the world to come and work in their hospitals and on the buses and factories and whatever. So
I wasn't saying that. I was just saying, like, is it bad for countries to teach their own history in their schools?
No, it's not, but you have to balance it with other people's history. Otherwise, you're gonna have a group of people what's built with high self-esteem and confidence, and then you're going to have other groups of young people who are having to search for that elsewhere. And if you've not got the right members of staff and the right people working within the schools, then they're not able to get that out there to them. You know, if they haven't got that care, or they're not bothered, or they don't even realize that there's an issue, what needs addressing or whatever. I'm going to say as well, it's even down to like simple things like imagery. If you're walking around a school for 5 years, and you don't really see any positive imagery of Black people, whether it's young people or adults, or, you know, people in high places and successful people then it has an impact on your confidence and your self-esteem. Not to say that it's not the be all and end all for everybody, because you can still crack on and succeed, but you have to find that additional strength, you know what I mean? And where it comes into play with you, what you're saying now, Kevin, for me is, if you haven't got that coming from home, then you're at a disadvantage again. You know what I mean? Yeah. But that's the additional pressure of having to have that coming from home, because you're not going to get it from school necessarily. So, I mean, my answer to that question would be, to some extent, not totally, because there's other issues what are impacting on some of the young people and stopping them from progressing in education. But some of that is still how the education system set up in regards to minorities, and in particular, the Black community, or even more in particular, for some reason, the Black Caribbean community. Yeah, so I kind of would take, you know, there's a few factors, and maybe the education system is still, it's work in progress, and it's improved a lot from the 60s, but I think there's still some things what could be improved on even further.
Well, basically now someone explained to me the model. The model what is in education now is a business model. That's what
the academy stuff, yeah.
It's not even just the academies, like in education, these institutions are being run like businesses. Education is now a business, whether you choose to perceive it or not. Do you know what I mean? And in that business model, because it's gone to a business model now, there's no room for race anymore. Like, it's not about race anymore. Like, it's about business.
Do you know what I mean? Who's achieving the highest and
this is not discrimination, and all that is not really part of the model anymore, and it's not being taught or learned either. So what I mean is, it's not like there's, you know, big push to promote any training or learning on these things because it's not part of the model.
Mm.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So,
Mm.
and plus, the reason why I say that is because part of the model is like what the evidence is out there to suggest, which is going to be presented in the next. When we have the next podcast, that's going to be presented in the next one. Hey, can someone mute there? Can hear some background noise?
Sorry.
It's all right, yeah. So what's going to come out in the next podcast is the information that shows that if let's just take it like this. If you got a black person from a rich, affluent area, and then a black person from a poor area,
you're going to see a difference.
No, the information shows that their experience in the education system will be roughly the same. But if if you are not.
Sorry, but is that going to the same schools or going to different schools?
No, going to different schools. It doesn't matter. Like so like when I say that, you know, I mean like the likelihood of you being excluded, or the likelihood of you getting into trouble, or likelihood of you not passing your exams, or likelihood of you being bored in class or not having a good all of these, you know, when you go and interview people about their experiences at school, it doesn't change for class. And I'm sure some of you guys in this room can know that, like to say, you know, we're not all from the same area. And we didn't all grow up in the same financial situation. But I can tell you what, I bet we can all relate to certain experiences at school because of your color. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not too sure though, Kev, because I know what you're saying, and I'd like to do the further research to kind of get to the bottom of, and maybe follow up to this. If we do one, we'll have a look at some of that. But class is another thing, like the, you know, terminology is class and whatever, but it's the world what we live in. And when you're coming from a poorer class background, regardless of what color you are, there's additional challenges what you have, what sometimes become a hurdle to you progressing in education. So whether it be financial, you know what I mean, your parents haven't got the money to do this and do that, whatever. Education itself, so that your family, your extended family and your parents are not educated to support you with certain levels of work and whatever, what professions your parents are in. So if you do have to go to school and have certain challenges or whatever, they know how to go and present properly and stuff like that. So I'm not too sure whether that, you know what I mean, I'd like to see the kind of evidence behind that and whatnot, because even like what Gavin said, does it depend on what kind of school? Because I know even like some schools are going to have better league tables and better achievement than other schools, and that has always been the case, isn't it? Like, you know, in Sheffield, since we've been born, we can tell you who the high achieving schools are, and it hasn't really changed that much over time. And we can tell you who the low achieving schools are, and then low achieving schools may go up and down. Some days, some years they might be good, some days they might go back to satisfactory, whatever. But the good schools have tended to be good all the time, and them good schools are placed within certain areas of Sheffield. So I think that does have some level of impact. And then how class and race are linked for me is that when you think of poorer communities, you kind of, as bad as it sounds, you do kind of expect that there's going to be a high percentage of black people within that community. And that's kind of global as well for me, really. You know what I mean? That's kind of global. So that's why some of the stats what I've looked at, what we might bring up a bit later, and during my time in education as well, it's been thrown at me that because at one stage it was all about black boys underachieving and there's money for this and there's money for that and there's money for this, and then a couple of years down later they're saying that, oh, hold on, wait a bit, whether they got fed up with funding that cause or not, or whether they just found some new stats. I don't think it's new stats, I think it's always been the case, but they were saying, hold on, wait a bit, white British boys poorer class British boys are underachieving even more than black children. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I seen that stat. I seen something about that as well.
I think
Yeah,
that's
but
still the case now.
understand what I'm saying though, and this is not me saying this. This is what the researchers suggested, and we're gonna get a professional in to come and relay that information to the public properly, because obviously I'm not the professional, I can't relay it properly. But the basic summary of the information was that, like, class doesn't have as much impact on black people as it does on European people, meaning that if you're black, no matter what class, you're still black. Whereas the European person, if you're different class, will give you a different experience
That makes sense, yeah.
and a different outcome, basically. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So that kind of aids the study.
That kind of makes sense.
You can see that for, like, for instance, for Irish and English. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The difference in their experience.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's basically what we're saying. You know what I mean? Which shows some flaws in the current system, because it's not equal. You're not getting equal. It's not equal treatment, is it?
No, and that's what that's what I mean. And that's why it would have been good to have 1 or 2 more members or people from the community to give their points on it, because obviously there's no right or wrong answers. It's about a discussion and trying to find out you know, common understandings and whatnot, so we can look to move forward. Because one thing what I think we all agree on in our group is that moving forward in the future, we have to become more self-reliant and stop looking to other people to kind of help us along. You know what I mean? So if the education system's there, and like what you're saying, Kevin, there's not that much of an issue anymore in making progress. If you are high achieving or you're able to achieve, then obviously then that part of the pot what is responsible to parents and community and families then needs to be looked at a bit more, so that, you know, that puts it back on their toes a bit more. Like, you need to kind of get more involved with your children's education and whatnot. Otherwise, they're not going to succeed. Even if they're at even if they're a brilliant school and whatnot, you can't just leave it to the teachers to grab hold of them and say, "Oh yeah, he's a star." It needs support from home and even support from the community. You know, when I say support from the community, it can be various different things in regards to, like, even putting on provisions or support or positive modeling and stuff along them lines. But
I'll
yeah,
just say, yeah, like, as to add to what you just said, if you think about it logically, and it's going to link to what I said originally about it's all involving self, really. Like, yes, we can look at the education system, and yes, we can blame the education system and say certain things, but it always boils back down to self. Like, whose responsibility is it to educate your children? If you check it really,
Yeah,
like,
for me,
we always say it's their responsibility. Like, we pass it on to what our society has become used to now is services. So we see there's a service out there called school, what you're supposed to educate my kid. So it's not really my responsibility to educate my kid. It's only my responsibility to make sure that they go to school.
They get to school.
Yeah, and then you're supposed to work your magic. And I think the same, this is how I think, this is just my personal thoughts, but the same kind of process happens in the community in terms of, like, I'll give you another service, what everybody relies on, social services. So, for example, in your community, if you know that a young person is being abused or they're not being looked after properly or they're being neglected, instead of the community coming together and doing something about that, or instead of you doing something about that personally, like going to the person's house and saying, look, you need to fix up, or little Billy needs to come and stay at my house, or, you know what, we'll take little Billy off you, seeing as you can't handle him. you see it as, no, that's not my job. There's a service out there that I'm supposed to call up that service, and they're supposed to come and fix all this problem for me. It's not my responsibility no more. And I think whilst ever communities think like that, there is no community, is there really? Because they say it takes a village to raise a child.
Because in that, sorry, Gavin, go on.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel that's the same as well. Like you said, it is the community. We do need that community to raise and to be with our children and take that responsibility as well, innit? So
yeah, why should some stranger? And this is why we don't get no love off the strangers, because if you think about it, the guy from the social services, he doesn't really know you or have any love or care or compassion for you. He's coming because he's been paid. do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I think society has that effect though on us as well, innit? It makes us subconsciously give up that responsibility. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because we're too stressed. They say you need to be free to work and to earn money and to do this. That's why microwave meals exist, don't they? Because they say, look, we know you're busy.
Yeah, takeaways, everything fast food, so you can just work for us and then neglect whatever else used to have value. So
yeah, because even your kids, what they're saying is like, you work, you hustle, but we'll look after your kids. Don't worry. There's nursery services, there's school services, there's all these kind of you just concentrate on your work and the money.
So you ain't got the time to invest as well.
You haven't got the time to look after
your community. Once again, so that's possibly another
time is most important.
Education system, or the system itself might be failing. Not just Black community, maybe various communities. But once again, if we know that, I suppose it's just a case of people, families, parents, and community just stepping up to the plate, innit, really?
Where we're failing ourselves, because even if you know the system's failing, even if you know, think about it, even if you know the system's failing, or if you know the system is not good, and yet you continue to
rely on
keep your child as part of that system, but you just want to complain about it from the outside, like, really, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, you're not.
It's a bit like the Black Lives Matter thing, innit? Do you know what I mean? You see it and that you complain, but no, I'm not going to take part. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't agree with racism. I don't thingy about it. I think it's all wrong and that. But if I see something happen, I'm not really gonna. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna anything about it. Yeah, I'm not gonna
challenge it or say anything or do anything. It's the same what we say about education. So we say schools not educating my kid right, and it was like, all right, then it's your kid, you educate him. No. That sounds like too much hard work, that, mate.
I think my point to know and take on into consideration for us and others who may listen to this video in the future, I think what's important for me personally, I think what's important, the academics, I think school can be left to deal with that, because that is their responsibility as such, legally in some kind of ways. Where we need to come in as adults and parents of Black children is that support, that cultural education and confidence and esteem building. So whether you're doing, reading Black books at home about Black inventors or Black history, or you're just making your child more culturally aware of who they are and what they stand for and where they're coming from and whatnot. I think if those things are covered at home, which definitely, more than likely are not going to get really covered to the fullness at school, then school can deal with the rest, because obviously they're trained professionals to teach whatever they're going to teach, aren't they? You as a parent can't be good at every single subject. You might be quite intelligent, so you might be able to support your child in that sense, but they are, you send your school to be taught, your children to school to be taught by people who are professionally trained and got qualifications to teach what they're teaching. But the rest of the education, self-education, and so on and so forth is where I think Black families, it's important for them to get involved with that.
I agree, and we have to do more. But here's another myth now that I just want to dispel. The myth is, just understand this, from you open your eyes when you're born, you are learning from the very second you open your eyes until the last second that you close your eyes. This learning happens naturally. You cannot stop it. That's how we all learn. Yeah, that's how we all learn to talk, walk, and everything. So kids, actually, like one analogy what's given to me, would you teach kids about nature by taking them to the woods, or do you sit them in a classroom and put on a big PowerPoint presentation about all the things that you could find in the woods, like little bugs and little trees and little this and little that? So I say that to say that, like, a lot of parents could educate their kids not by getting the book out and sitting down with them and trying to do, just by doing things,
leading by example,
but just by living life with them. So even
on that point,
even just taking them on holiday, like instead of me getting a geography book out and telling you about Spain and all they say Olau and all this, how about we go to Spain and you see for yourself?
Even on that point, I think even when we were younger, we had YTSs and apprenticeships, and growing up, maybe not us personally, but I know that a lot of kids that I knew, they used to go to work with the dads. So if the dads were trades or whatever trade or whatever it was, they'll go and they'll spend the day or whatever it is in the garage or wherever it is, and the parents will be saying, pass me the spanner, pass me this tool, and the kid don't know it, but he's learning. You know what I mean? And I think that is a problem with us. We're like, oh, I've got to go to work, I've got to leave my kid at home. Yeah. So your kid's not learning what you do. He's not learning anything practical. You know what I mean?
Right.
And as we know, with a baby, a baby that can't talk, just because he can't talk doesn't mean it's not learning.
Exactly.
And it's watching and it's picking up everything, and then one day it comes out and just says something or does something, and you're like, where did it learn that? Where did it hear that? Where? How did it say it so clearly, like it's been talking for how long, and where? Do you know what I mean? And it's the same with us as we go all the time through our life. If we see things, or if we're actively engaging in it, we seem to learn a lot more than just sitting down and being told about something, or no, the structure. You know what I mean? The practical always seems to be better for me.
Exactly. For me personally, in fact, I think a lot of black people do relate to that. But what the point I'm trying to make is, if we're being honest, even myself, I'm going to put myself on the grill here. A lot of us, you ain't doing nothing with the kids. When they come home from school, you know what I mean? You it's almost like some babysitting role. You feed them, you know, you make sure they're safe, you make sure this, you make sure that, but you're not doing anything, are you? You know what I mean? Like to say, we're going out now, we're going to the park, we're going to look at this activity, or I'm going to take you to this place, car, I want you to see this, or me and you is going to engage in some kind of activity. We're going to do football together, or we're going to do whatever. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So they're like an extra, you're talking about like extra, what school called extracurricular, isn't it? But you're doing it at home.
Yeah, but you again, because most of us are work, busy, stressed, all these things, when you come home from work, like, you don't necessarily do the things that you should be doing. Most of us think that we deserve a pat on the back because you make the kid do homework. So because when they come through the door, you go, have you got any homework? Well, if you've got some homework, love, go and get upstairs and do it. You think, I'm doing a really good job. But it's like, I'm not saying you're not doing a good job, because obviously kid fi do homework. Do you know what I mean? But it's more important for parents to know that you're supposed to be interacting with your child. It's your responsibility to educate them. And if they don't know...
Active involvement, innit?
Active involvement, yes. To have a spiritual relationship with them, because obviously, if you're not communicating with them and if you don't have a relationship with them, then how would you know if they're having problems or difficulties or stress or anything? But also, you got to build with them, man, and you educate them. You know what I mean? And us educate them, because that goes back to my point, Gav, what I was saying before in our podcast, and I've said it before, when like I keep talking about self. If you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else, and you can't expect anybody to love you in return. So until our community starts to love itself and starts to think like, I don't forget about everybody else educating us, we educating us.
So
Because
Kev, I put up the next slide, but before I go on to that, I was just thinking a question what we didn't think of. What's just come to me, what's relevant. We talked about the education system. Is there any failings within that? But we've also covered there a question what went up, which was we talked about earlier about the parenting strategies and techniques in the 60s and 70s and their starting point and what they had to work from. But I was saying then, is there any failings in the parenting of our young people in regards to education? And what I think, you know, I think what we're saying is there's some positives and there's some negatives as well, and there's still what need to be ironed out. I think that's what we're saying there.
There is, but I think every generation has done their best. Like, I believe that every generation, including ours, the one what we're in now, all the parents have had good intentions for their children, because we've all come from poverty and we've all had to struggle. So everybody doesn't want their kid to have to struggle. So they've said to their kid, like, you make sure you get, I mean, come on, man. Back in the day, people used to get beaten for all them something there. You should be like, what? You're not doing well at school. Teacher call home from school.
Well, that's what I think that's what I was gonna mention. I think one of the positives of our generation parenting is that the communication with the child is a bit more transparent, a bit more open. So yeah, you're not achieving at school, lick back, boof, boof, boof. Yeah, that's one approach. But then sitting down and talking, why you're not, you know what I mean, trying to fathom with the child why you're not achieving at school, and making them feel comfortable to be able to correspond with you and interact with you about the issues, whatever it is, whether it's Mrs. So-and-so, what he's not getting on with, whether it's peer pressure, whether it's this, whether it's that, whatever, able to talk to you. I think back in the days, that weren't necessarily that easy to do. You know what I mean? With some of our parents' families. No fault of their own, like I said, because the intention was the best, but they just, you go to school, get educated, you know what I mean? And that's black and white as that. And then if you've got any politics about that, you've just got to deal with it yourself. And some of us were able to do that, and some of us weren't. You know what I mean? Some of us didn't have the tools. And some of us, you know, it didn't work for some of us, and it worked, and some were able to escape and get through. But the next, I believe
we have to do, this question here, what's on the board now, it says, why do you feel or should be the benefits for Black children being educated in the UK? You know what I mean? Like, I think I've already said, you know, we should be doing more education ourselves. And these kids, like, they do have access to a lot of opportunities and a lot of resources that other people around the world do not have access to. And sometimes I feel like because we haven't educated our kids properly in the first place, they don't know how to take full advantage of the opportunity what's in front of them. Because, you know, it is a great opportunity if used correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right there, and I think that it needs to be on the end of that question. The benefits are, like we said earlier again in the podcast, that with all its, you know, changes, what might need to happen curriculum-wise and things what need looking at, British education is deemed as a high education. If you've got degrees or you've got qualifications over here, it's deemed as, it's looked at quite high globally, just like a lot of other things like the passport and everything else. But the quality of the education is quite high, and we should be able to utilize it in some way or another. We know all the politics, we know all the failings, we know all this and that, but we should be able to utilize it a bit better. What I've noticed looking at some basic stats and observations of the time I've been about, Black British young people, like I said earlier, in regards to the Caribbean being a bit stronger in that sense, if we might be failing within the education system, but a child from Ghana can come and get his head down and get his teeth into it and achieve highly. You know what I mean? Because they see the more importance of it. We've kind of been spoiled, and we've got it there, and it's like, oh, I'll take it or leave it kind of thing. Where somebody what hasn't born into that, they kind of come and think, well, I can't mess up this. You know what I mean?
And it's a spoiled culture what we have here. Because think about it, these kids get the Xbox and get the iPad regardless of how they do at school.
Oh yeah.
They still get the Nike trainers, they still get everything. So where's the incentive to actually boss your head and get these things? That's the difference between us and other people that come from abroad. Like, yes, there's a cultural difference, and a lot of these people, you know, they got more cultural knowledge, so they get on better. But also it's because they've got like a carrot dangle in front of their face, haven't they? So because they've never had the iPad and the Nike and the this and the that, they want it. And they're going to work damn hard to get it. Do you see what I mean? Whereas you've had Nike on your foot all the time. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, I've a bit away from the discussion in a sense, but I think our culture, as in like the Black British culture, or your Black American culture, or your Western countries, you know what I mean? You dominant global countries. I think we focus on them things there a bit too much anyway. You know what I mean? We focus on the material because we've kind of been trained to do that in a sense, and it benefits certain people for us to be like, oh, Nike, Adidas, and whatever, and la la la. So we focus on that a bit too much, and the important things, the really important things, we're not really that asked about. You know,
the main driver is always money, isn't it? Like that's the main drive that most people get out of bed for. You know what I mean? And you find the more desperate you are for money, like the more you need the money, then the harder you're prepared to go. And that's just it. So people from abroad, don't get me wrong, they do come and embarrass us a lot, but I think most of the times we know why.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's down to us to do something about that. Because again, the people that are here, they've lost their way. So that means when you come up from abroad, you come here with a mission. You are coming for nothing. I left my home and my family to come here to mess about.
Yeah.
I came for a reason. Us here, you lost your way. You forgot the reason why you're here. You're just here messing about.
Yeah. Yeah, just here messing about a lot.
You're just messing about. You're literally ramping.
Yeah, but the benefits from the education system are the opportunity to gain good qualifications, aren't they? Really, that's what the benefits are. I think like we said earlier, you are able to do that. There is hurdles, and you might need some extra support from home and community and other positive role models. But I think the opportunities are there if you really want to get your head down, and they should be there. For the second part of the question, is that there should be the benefits. You're entitled to be able to educate yourself.
And the access to resources, don't forget that, because even things like being able to go to a room full of computers and access the internet, like you can't take that for granted, because there's many countries you know what I mean, you can't go and find a room full of computers that you could just go and type up an assignment or go on the internet. And do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at the next question. Right, do you think there is anything missing from our children's education? If so, what? I think we might have covered some of that already, haven't we?
Yeah, but I think the main thing what we're missing is the only thing what I think is missing from children's education this day in age is the cultural education and the identity of self, which most people don't think is very powerful. Like most people think, well, that don't mean no. And
it's massive.
Shut up. Yeah. But it's actually massive. Yeah. It's going to be the main thing from your kid being like a doctor or being a shotter on road or some shoppiness like that. Like it really is that deep.
And knowing, and I suppose within that as well, knowing what we're saying about cultural education you know what I mean, what it means. It don't mean like these terms what we've had over the years, a case of acting black or whatever that, you know what I mean, them kind of terms like that. It's nothing to do with that. It's about learning about self, like you say, learning about past, learning about future, learning about culture, and building that confidence and esteem and whatnot. Because I think sometimes as a community, I think in our generation, I've seen it quite a bit, and I imagine it probably still goes off now to some extent. You can kind of get bogged down with like, oh, I need to be, you know what I mean? Like this kind of way. So then if I'm going to be like this kind of way, that means that I need to disengage from education, or I don't want to be seen doing this, I want to be seen doing that. I need to be seen doing these kind, you know what I mean? And that additional pressure. So when we say cultural education, it's not a case of like turning your child away from making progress at school. We're on about more substantial things. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, most definitely. So that I haven't really got not more to add to that, because that I think that is a different topic within itself, what we could address one day in the future. You know what I mean? But yeah, definitely more knowledge of self is needed for these kids.
Well, I think I really, like you're saying, I agree. I think that's the main thing, and we've mentioned it earlier in the discussion as well. I think that's the main thing. What's missing, whether or not school will ever be able to provide that for us as Black people, anyway. That again is the other question.
Should they?
And whether they should. I'm not saying, you know what I mean. I think that there might be a role for them to play within that, but they're not in the position anyway to be giving the full 100.
I was going to say, because now we're going to go back to the practical side of things, because if I want to learn about native Indians, like, would it be best for me to read a book and watch some PowerPoint presentations, or would it be best for me to go and check some native Indians?
Yeah, or read a book, what a native Indians wrote, or whatever.
Yeah, or something like, some real authentic native Indian stuff. You know what I mean? And that's the only real way to learn, and otherwise it's all secondary.
So the other part of that is like, what's missing, what we've discovered what's missing is more of a cultured basis. The other part of the question is where that comes from. Then if you don't come from school, then you was obviously we're gonna be suggesting home initially, but then like back in the day, you used to have Saturday schools and Sunday schools and all that kind of stuff, didn't you? Which our community haven't really got that much of anymore. But a lot of the cultural kind of education came from them kind of places, you know what I mean? And they was set up, and they was in an easy place to kind of facilitate that kind of learning. Like us, for example, we got a lot of ours from the hub, didn't we? We didn't get it from school. We went to hub and Sadaka and places like that.
But it was parents and people like that who set that up. Yeah, they our adults, our parents, our elders all set that up, and they had all that in mind. They knew that the youths them need cultural this and culture, so that's why they put it all there.
And you know something as well. The thing is, like, this is one documentary, but I watched another one not long ago, which touched on some issues, race issues and whatever, and it were like from 60s or 70s or whatever time. But all the things are still relevant, which is like makes you wonder. Have we gone around in a big massive circle, or we missed the trick, or because, like you said, in that era, the parents facilitated them things because they knew that we'd need it. Then, like, all that's gone, but we still need it.
Yeah, but that's our fault, because at the end of the day, for example, no, it is, and I'll tell you the truth, because think about it, our parents did it, we didn't. So the bottom line is, like, I'll give you one thing what I learned the other day. Do you remember Walter Rodney?
I remember Walter Rodney. Yeah.
Now, even just a little thing like that, because I know that building, nobody's ever thought, like, why did they name it Walter Rodney?
Oh yeah,
why?
well,
it's a bit of a funny name, that, isn't it?
Yeah, Walter Rodney's a person, isn't he?
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. So they're leaving cryptic clues for you, like, so all my life I've known about this Walter Rodney, even though I haven't known about this Walter Rodney. I've just known the building. but them elders have named it that on purpose
Yeah.
to trigger thoughts like that inside little youngsters like me. Who is this Walter Rodney? And why have you named this building Walter Rodney? And then when I come,
in all honesty, up until that point, I don't think I really knew who Walter Rodney was.
exactly, that's my
Yeah.
point. If they didn't name that building Walter Rodney, I would have never heard that name.
Yeah.
And now it turns out that he's a guy that's just like Marcus Garvey or Malcolm X or any one of them big top man.
Mm.
So it's very important, these things, like even just little things like that. The naming of a building. You know what I mean?
So like I said, the clubs or the Saturday schools or the Sunday schools, and them kind of places, I think are positively quite pivotal.
Yeah, youth clubs and such as well, yeah, including that as well.
The what?
Like youth clubs.
Youth clubs, yeah, that's what I said. Clubs, yeah.
All of them things.
That's where that's gonna take place.
It's just it's that building of that. Oh no, it's building that for our children, black children, as you touched on earlier, that we've got to teach them to love themselves.
Yeah.
And I think the way to do that, or to counteract the system of how it is portrayed, is we have to be showing them role models, what they can relate to, that look like them. Yeah. Because
and also,
for instance,
sorry,
for instance, if you were to ask a young child now, or one of the young generation, about Malcolm X, Martin Luther, all of these civil rights and things, half of them don't know nothing about it.
No.
So when you're talking to them about these people have come before you, it's just out there. You know what I mean? You have to, but if you mention to them Mayweather, do you know what I mean? You might mention to them a footballer or something. Do you know what relates to them, what they can see? Yeah. Then you might get their attention.
And build on that, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Build on that.
But I think for us, well, for me, when I found in school, when they were trying to tell us anything about ourselves, yeah, history-wise, it was always slavery and it was always negative.
I said that earlier before. Come on, Gav.
It was always a negative connotation. Even if they're putting on films, I remember at my school they're putting that Blazing Saddles. And even though it's a spoof and it's comedy and that, but when you sat around and you're the one black person in the class and it's full of white people and they're putting on that and they're making jokes on that and everyone's laughing, it's
demoralizing. It's demoralizing.
Yeah.
Demoralizing. And the only defense we had against that, there's no talk, there's no educational comeback, there's no discussion, reasoning. The only comeback we had against that was thump up. You know what I mean? Anybody make any joke and that? That's all you had.
Yeah,
that's all you had. And then you're gonna get obviously in trouble. Obviously, you're gonna get pulled up about that. But that's all we had because you were kind of caught off guard in a sense. You were just being sent, "Oh, we're gonna do listen on black," and then it's just this and put in front of you. So you kind of caught on the back foot. And there were no response for that. But like I said, like we're saying here, if that's done outside school and the children are going to school with a good knowledge, then they can counteract that. Because like when you listen to a man like Akala, when you listen to him about his school experience, for whatever reason, he had that kind of in him to challenge things like that from that age. I'll be honest, I didn't. It kind of went over my head a bit until I left school and I was like, why didn't I wish I'd have stood up a bit more and said certain things and whatever this but for some reason he had that within him from being young where he could challenge that and had the interest to try and challenge it and stuff like that as well. And if you read his book and listen to his lecture and whatever, he attended certain things what he found pivotal in his life to be able to go to school, and if he did hear any rubbish, he could challenge it rather than just sit there and then kind of kick yourself 20 years later and say, why did I sit there and entertain that? You know what I mean? So that is that. I think we're in agreement there in a sense. What's missing from our children's education, not the academic side of stuff. The teachers can deal with that. It's more of a cultural identity kind of education. what's highly important, especially in this modern times for me now, because our culture is a thing what's kind of got a bit wish-washed. It's just got blended up with everything else, and that's not helping in a sense our young people, because they need a bit more of a linear approach to things rather than just like generic. And that's what's going off at the moment. Everything's just general, even culture.
Yeah, I agree.
So quickly, just to kind of look at with some kind of stats and information, just some evidence which might even back up some of the stuff what we were saying. So on the left there, you've got percentage of pupils meeting expected standards of reading. I mean, that is quite vague in a sense, really, as a stat, but when you look at all the stats together, kind of get a bit of a picture, or at least I did. So what we're looking at here is this report, this portion. Oh, my circles, naff. I'm not using the proper mouse, I'm using the touch mouse. But if you look there, black on the whole, 76%. What the lowest percent, I mean, they're all in the 70s roughly anyway. You've got a few exceptions of like white Irish on there, Indian, quite high.
Can you read out the title, please? Benton, what does it say? Read out the title, what it says above that, because
I've got it covered up. Hold on a sec, because I've got the annotator on.
All right, I'll read it then. It says
Pupils. I mean, this title of this one is pupils meeting expected standard of reading by ethnicity, but the title in yellow says what? Sorry.
Current stats. No, not the current stats and figures, but I just wanted to say, you know, for people at home, for them to be able to say, it says percents of pupils meeting expected standards
of reading by ethnicity.
Reading by ethnicity, yeah. So that's just wanted to make sure you got that in there. That's all.
Yeah, I had said that. Yeah, but Indians quite high, and Chinese. But within the black, it's broken down in it. So all these slides with stats on, you're going to see the same breakdown of ethnicity. You've got black, which is generic. And then in the lighter blue, you got black African, black Caribbean, and black other. So within the black section, which I've highlighted with red, as you can clearly see, black Caribbean is the lowest. And looking at the whole list of different ethnicities, we are the joint with white other, which I'm not sure which ethnicity that is. Again, that might be the poorer class, white boys or whatever. I'm not sure, it's not specific. The only people lower than the black Caribbean group are Roma, which obviously have their challenges, and Irish travelers. And if you have come across any travelers and gypsy Romas, you know, they've got their challenges in life and whatnot. So excluding them, we're coming in quite low with that. Now, these stats are the latest stats on .gov website. They're not 2021, but they're the latest stats what are on there. You can go and have a look yourself if you want. So on the other side is similar to the reading one, but this is maths, meeting expected standard of maths. And again, let me just hide my screen. And again, if you look, the numbers speak for themselves in a very similar way to the reading. So again, you've got the black generic umbrella, and then under that you got black African, black Caribbean. Black Caribbean being the lowest within that sub ethnicity. If you look also on both stats, mixed white and black Caribbean also come in quite low. Mixed white and black African are higher. These are things that we need to discuss as community and as people to try and work out why this may be. Because again, I think even in the original documentary what we're discussing, it was more focused on people from the Caribbean, not really the black African story. And they're black people just like us, aren't they? So
we discussed this we discussed this before, and even to say the main differences, which again, people think are really, really small, but I think the stats are showing that it's not, is one, their African people's family values tend to be a lot better than Caribbean people's. Meaning, and when I say that, I mean, you know, there's a lot more African families that stay together than there is Jamaican ones, and that is cultural. And also their knowledge of self, because they're African, and their cultural knowledge is generally tends to be better than the Caribbeans. So
basically what you're saying there, Kevin, is that the stuff what we're saying we need to provide through clubs and after school and Saturday school and home and whatever, you're saying that that's already happening in the Black African community and homes.
It is, and it's happening in the way that I said it, because it's not happening in the fact that people are getting out flip charts and sitting down with these kids. No, these little kids are living the experience in Africa. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So they get the cultural.
I think I'm not sure if it's not. These are over here still, you know, not in Africa. But I get what you mean. Still, these are. Same applies whether they're over here. I think they just keep that standard, don't they? Whereas,
they keep their culture. They keep their culture, and they've had it embedded anyway. So.
Well, that might be a different podcast or a different Flix and chat what we can look at, because it is a big thing and it's been going on for years, and I've heard it since being a youth. Do you know what I mean? The Black Caribbean community seems to be underachieving a lot more than other Black communities, and also obviously other ethnic communities who have had certain challenges put in front of them as well. So there is issues there, what we need to address as a community, possibly on future podcasts or Flix and chats or whatever, as to where are we going wrong, do you know what I mean? And accepting it and wearing it and being prepared to do something about it. Because there's some things what we all know what are quite obvious. There's some things what are not as obvious what we need to discuss and fathom. But there's some things what are quite obvious what we've always known and do know, what seem to be just swept under the carpet and continue and continue and continue. And that leaves us in the same position to put stats up, what show us underachieving in certain areas.
Gav, mute your mic a sec, please, Gav.
No, I mean,
Gav.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if we look on to other, let me just.
How many more slides? Because I'm getting conscious at time, you know.
Yeah, I know. So I'll just rush through these in a sense. Let me just clear all drawings. So, I mean, them highlights could stop in really because they're in the same spot. But we're moving on to progress now. And progress A, if people don't know, because it's not really a common term, it's a current way of analysing progress, what we use in England, and it's how well students have progressed academically in secondary school. So a +1 is a pupil who achieve one grade higher than pupils in from similar situation within the school. So different ethnicities, but similar situation. And -1 is pupils achieving 1 grade lower. So here again, when you look at it, if I just highlight it quickly, you got your black African, which is in the blue or whatever terminology you want to use. Then you got Black Caribbean, which is in the red, you know, going into minus. It's only -30, it's not a full one, which shows some level of underachievement there, alongside again, mixed white Black Caribbean down here. And then obviously scoring quite low, or very low, should I say, is your Gypsy Roma and your Irish Travellers, which for obvious reasons, in a sense, people should know that, you know, they may come in quite low. Your Chinese coming in very high. So again, it shows the same kind of pattern, is what I noticed. And then again, pupils achieving grade 5 in English and maths by ethnicity. Once again, one of the lower percentages are coming in as Black Caribbean. Black African are much higher. Black as a generic umbrella is higher, but the Black Caribbean, and if we look down at mixed white and Black Caribbean, so mixed race kids, as we know, underachieving equally as much. So there's you know what I mean? There's a obvious pattern building up. And the last statistic slide, which I put on, was now looking at the other side. So that's achievement. So it's showing you that we're going backward, you know, we're going on the red side with achievement. Then we're looking at permanent exclusion rates on this side. Guess who's, oh, hold on. Sorry. Forget the thing up again. Yeah, guess who's up high on the exclusion? So not on the achievement side, but up high on the exclusion, you've got Black Caribbean. Only people near to them, mixed white Black Caribbean, and then only people near to them, higher than them, is Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller again. So the pattern is, it's an obvious one, isn't it? Temporary exclusions, which we know as fixed term exclusions, 5.54 Black as an umbrella, and then 10.37 for Black Caribbean, in comparison to 4.13 for Black African. Again, the only people what's got anywhere near that is mixed white Caribbean, and then obviously higher than that is Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller again. So without even being like a statistic bookworm kind of thing, you can quite simply see that Black Caribbean community, separate from Black African community, as I said, we might have to have a reasoning about that to find out the exact reasons why, and have some discussions about that. But it's happening in the Black Caribbean community quite a lot, the underachievement and the high exclusion rate. So not all of that can be school alone. Do you get what I mean? For me personally, not all of that.
That's what I was saying to you, bro. Right at the start, I said we have to start looking at self. We're always trying to blame external things, but like you said, education starts at home, doesn't it? And everything starts with yourself. So that's what we've said. What can be done moving forward? I think we need more. It's each one teach one, innit? I mean, basically, like we said at the start, until you can educate people, like, so you can't solve a problem until you can see a problem. And if you don't even know there's a problem, then how are you even going to go about solving it? So I think we need to be having the discussions with people so that we're all on the same page and everybody's aware of what's been done. Because then again, if we're all on the same page and we're all doing it together, then surely we could come together and make things easier for ourselves.
Well, like I agree with that totally, and speeding things up a bit, because like you said, we did start a bit late because we're waiting for some people, but time's moved on a bit and we've gone a bit over originally what we'd planned to do. But I think it's probably time to mention, I think what we've discovered and confirmed here, there'll be other things, and if there was other people on the live, we'd probably come up with some other solutions and ideas and options. But what we've, between us three, have agreed is that the cultural identity kind of learning is important, is highly important for our young people. And some more delving into the issue behind Black Caribbean young people underachieving, and have been for quite some time. Do you know what I mean? So they're two things what can be looked at and done moving forward. Some kind of moving forward, looking at provisions, extracurricular clubs and whatnot to facilitate these kinds of projects, and also discussions and forums where we can support parents and families in being able to support their young people as well, because we've also agreed that's one other aspect what's highly important moving forward in regards to the Black community and education. So I think what we were saying, Kev, weren't we, that we're going to possibly have in a month's time a follow-up to this live, where we're going to further look at things in a bit more depth with a friend and colleague of ours. Some people might already know him, called Jonathan Williams, who's currently studying at PhD around these same issues in education, what we've been talking about today. And he stressed some interest in wanting to put across some of his findings from his research and have some further discussion into some of the stuff what we mentioned today. So hopefully when that's put together by us and we put it out there, hopefully we can have a few more members of the group and a few more members of the community to discuss what we'll be looking at on that day.
Yeah, because what Jonathan wants to bring to the table is obviously he's done a lot of research into this topic, and he wants to bring to the table like how the education system is now in modern day, and also share some of the experiences of people that have been through that system so that we can come to some conclusions about what can be done about this and how should we move forward, and stuff of that nature. So it should be a really good show, and I know I'm looking forward to it myself personally, because I'm really interested in the information he's got to bring to the table. So yeah, I'm looking
and then
forward to
come to some conclusions out, because like I said, there's two or three things that we've kind of discovered today, whether we knew them beforehand or we've discovered them today during the discussion or whatever, but there's two or three things which I think are concrete in what needs to be done. And then obviously if we're getting a more in-depth look at stuff with Jonathan, we'll be able to find other ways and things what need to happen moving forward to improve the current situation.
Yeah.
So that is something to look forward to, yeah. So
stay tuned.
That's it really. See you next time. If you have obviously not been on the live, hopefully you'll watch this recorded version. And like we said earlier in the live relay, as a community, we need to kind of come together and have these kind of discussions in order to know what needs doing, because there is things what needs scratching up on, and there is improvements what being made. Or if we want as a community, we can just stay in the same position and we're back here in another 40 years. My youth, you know what I mean? My youth will be sat in chair doing a live. It might be some virtual thing by then, like holograms and all that kind of stuff. But they'll be having the same chat, because like I said, I go on YouTube and watch a documentary from 1970, and they're having a similar chat as what we're having now.
And they will talk about what our generation has done. Like if we had done now, they will say. they will not, just like I said to you before, our generation before, they built Water, they built the Hub, they built these places, so we're discussing it. So that means it stands to reason that your kid's gonna sit there and say, well, our generation didn't do all. They were too busy.
And at the same time as well, I think it's worth mentioning, it's not about, we're not looking for people to move mountains, is it? It's not about moving mountains. I think when we get together and really work out what needs to be done, it's small but significant things.
Doable things,
what each individual can do, what each family can do, and each approach, what people can take, which is going to have a bit more of a positive standing within the community and with even your own children, and preventing some of the negative things what are happening, what have been happening for a long time, which we just seem to accept. But you know what I mean? It's not good enough, not really good enough. So we have to start looking at ways forward before our time comes to an end. And like you said, the youth them look back and say, well, them guys didn't do all for us, or them guys, workless kind of thing.
Exactly. So I'm leaving this legacy for my kids, so my kids can say, well, at least my dad tried. Yeah.
And if it's even, like I said, small doable things, so even if a few people listen to this and get inspired, that's something what we've done, isn't it? If they think, you know what them guys says right, and they go out for an hour and do a bit of learning with their child, or they sit down and plan some extracurricular to do, you know what I mean? That's a success in it. So it's not like we're saying you have to change the world or anything like that. It's not about that really. It's just about doing doable things what need to be done, what we deep down we all need to be done, and working together to do that and building that strength Unity in the community is our slogan, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
So yeah,
good,
I'm gonna
good show, Bente.
I'm
Well
gonna
done.
I'm gonna call it a day now. I think they were just, I don't know if it's come up, it's not come up as it.
It has the social media, so everybody needs to stay tuned with the social medias, and you can be informed about the next upcoming podcasts and all the other wonderful stuff that we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, get involved because things will come from whatever we're doing. So this is just a quick poem, this Kev, what I found quickly, just to sign off with. It's around the same kind of topic what we've been discussing and what, so it's relevant. So
All right,
signing off.
excellent. See you all later, guys.
Respect, yeah, for being involved. And like I said, it would have been nice to have more people because you get more going on, more ideas, more thoughts, more brains. So next time, innit, yeah?
Yeah, no problem.
All right then. Later.
See you later. Thank
Yeah,
you.
respect.